Good morning, and thank you all for joining us for today's coffee talk. My name is Sean O'Brien, president of QuickRate, and as always, I'm pleased to be joined by Steve Huntington. Steve, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us again on this Friday morning. My name is Steve Huntington. I'm the Director of Analytics here at QuickRate and QwickAnalytics. I've spent my entire career working with community financial institutions on everything from credit and strategic planning to merger models and capital planning and model design and maintenance. And I've spent a little over a decade, a bit more than a decade actually now, working with Sean here at QuickRate.
Thank you, Steve. Steve, based on our pictures, I think maybe next month's polling questions, we'll put a poll in if we should update our pictures on our graph, on our slides.
Well, I mean, it's mostly this. This is what's aging me.
Just a reminder, how to participate. Certainly the chat and Q&A box are there for you. We'll take questions as we normally do, try to monitor those throughout the discussion and take them as quickly as we can. But certainly, if not, we'll towards the end of the presentation, we'll make sure we address all of those. In addition, the copy of the slides and a link to the recording will get emailed to you next week once we have everything prepared. And so again, just a reminder, we've done these just to try to be helpful and continue to do so. I will say, again, I think, here we are, the first quarter, a full year of call report data will now be available to us, and now we're starting on year 2. So first off, again, congratulations, everybody who kind of survived this. And now I think we're already starting to see in the questions that we get from users, I think there's a lot more, thought going into, if I change this, how do I do it? Or should I change this? Or, again, I think a growing evolution of comfort with the tool is a good thing, but it does prompt a lot of questions. And so we've certainly been, dealing with those hear from you. And again, I think this is, again, why we'll continue to do the coffee talks to try to, again, share as much as we're hearing and seeing from our banks. So as we have, again, just a few polling questions to start today. I think I was really focused on, I know at our bank, we're a little bit behind budget this year. And, so it made me think about, the reasons that, kind of are impacting that. And so I thought just to change it up slightly today, we'd talk a little bit about what you may be seeing. So the first question we have here today is where, if anywhere, do you see variances to your budget? And we'll go ahead and just give this a few seconds. Right, we'll go ahead and end this one and share the results. So again, interest expense, again, not surprisingly, interest income, then non-interest income and expense as well. So thank you for participating on that question. Next up are just around charge-offs. Did you charge off any loans in the first quarter? Just a yes or no here. I think we've kind of seen past dues trend up a little bit. But just kind of curious to see, if we are starting to experience maybe a little bit of a rise in charge-offs. Okay, let's give this another few seconds. That one and share it. 74% of you have not, and then 26% of you have. So again, thank you for answering on that. Next up are just past due loans. Again, did you see any increase in your past due loans this quarter? And again, I think it's, part of the thinking here by us was, again, CECL is supposed to be expected, and forward looking. And I think, call report does show us trends, but it's always kind of a little bit after the fact. And so again, I think just, I always feel like best what you're starting to feel or experience in your own institution, if things feel like they're changing at all. And so I was, again, just kind of curious on that today. So thank you. We'll end this one. Here we've got 65% of you have not, which is great to see. 35% of you have seen an increase in your past dues. And then the final question today is just first quarter status. After the first quarter, are you on budget, ahead of budget, or behind budget? As I indicated, at our bank, we're slightly behind, largely attributable to more so just we anticipated we've had a lot of payoff on loans, so our portfolio has shrunk a little bit, but just kind of curious to see where everybody else is. All right. Give this just a few more seconds. Okay, we'll go ahead and end this one. So pretty evenly split. 33% of you are on budget, 37% are ahead of budget. Congrats. And 29% of you are behind budget. So again, thank you for participating in the polling questions today. We will make the results available in the email that we send out early next week. Just again, this is really more of a placeholder of just again continuing to try to update you on things we're doing with the tool. Many of these we've talked about in the past, but I think we do have the announcement calendar or the announcement kind of tool on the site to keep people apprised of what we've updated within QwickAnalytics. But we also just want to try to do a better job of just continually reminding you of things that either have been updated or enhanced through the coffee talk. So these are just a few of those that we've discussed in the past, but again, just a reminder today. Steve, anything you want to add there before we move on?
There's one thing that we haven't mentioned before, I don't believe, on any of our coffee talks, as far that is a upcoming enhancement, particularly for the CECL tool, and that is we're currently working on automatic imports of the warm calculations. So for all of our users who we are handling the warms for you guys, typically the way that works, you send us your loan level data. We send you back an Excel file that has the entire analysis and then shows what the warm values are. And then you plug those warm values into the interactive tool. And then you can save the Excel file in the file upload or keep it as an ancillary file as well. But we had gotten lots of requests from users to automate that part of it. So that's what we're working on currently. The way it will work is that on the summary page where you're plugging in all those warms, there'll be a drop-down box right at the top, and you'll be able to choose a date that you've sent us your warms from in the past, and you can choose the date, and then you can choose the methodology that you'd like to use, whether it's the amortization methodology, whether it's the standard, the default sort of peer-based data, or whether it's one of the other methodologies, and then the warms that we've calculated for you from your data will populate on an automated basis into the tool.
Yeah, that's a good point, Steve. Yeah, so as Steve indicated, I would say that's probably been, for me, at the top or near the top of suggestions from users is, hey, we don't want to continue to manually put these in. Can't you upload them? And so, as Steve indicated, we are working on that. And so we'll keep you apprised, but again, we're trying to be responsive to what all of you see as potential enhancements or improvements to the tool, and then prioritize those the best we can.
And I would like to point out as well, as Sean pointed out, there's that little news piece that pops up when you log in, or you can click on it on the top left of your initial login. That kind of lets you know when we've added some other things. A couple of things that we've recently added to the platform, even in the last month or so, that aren't CECL specific.
Hey, Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you want to go ahead and share your screen just to show people?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that.
They don't know where it is.
Sure.
And so admittedly, we were not as good at this last year as we would have liked, but Steve, and we've made a kind of a pact just to make sure we try to be more responsive. But that news button is going to try to be more regularly updated as we impact anything on Quick Analytics, not just CECL. So,
And
sorry.
as we
Go ahead,
add,
Steve.
and as we add something, if we add something, whenever we add something important, we'll make sure that this pops kind of forces a pop-up so that you don't have to remember to come and look here on a regular basis. But I wanted to point out two things. First, we've been working on mapping the call report data even further into history. Our data started in 2007. And that's when we started the platform. We were going back to 2007. And the further back you go, as you guys all know, the call reports have certainly changed significantly over time. So the further back you go into history, the more convoluted the mapping becomes and more challenging it becomes. But we've had some requests, and especially in this type of economic environment, for institutions that really want to do more analysis on what the conditions were like before in the years leading up to the last credit cycle. So those years, 2005, 6, 7, leading up into 2008, 9, and we all know what happened then. And so we've been working hard on that, and we're just now added 5 more years of financial history. So for almost all of our call report field IDs and throughout the platform, you'll be able to go further back in time. That those columns are not in the CECL tool yet, because we have to figure out how to properly be able to export them and not have it be a 100-page long PDF report. But on the interactive pages, you can now go scroll further back in time. And the second one is the data dictionary. And I think I've pointed this out on a coffee talk before, but this is a great tool when you first log in, whether you're on the CECLSolver or any other part of the platform. You've got this kind of navigation bar up top, and if you click on this new button called Data Dictionary, it pretty much explains exactly what it is. It allows you to retrieve the field definitions, calculation details, and any notes or discussion for every single metric and line item that we have on our platform. So for example, if I was to type in something that's always fun to calculate, like margin, I'll click on the net interest margin here. It shows exactly how the formula is calculated. There's net interest income. And here is average earning assets, and it makes a note of that as well. And so here are all the call report fields that go into our calculation of a net interest margin. You can also go, if you're curious about the call report fields themselves, you still don't have to go to the FDIC's data dictionary. Please don't attempt to do that. RIAD 4074, I can go to the call report list and type in 4074. And there we go. Call report code 4074 is net interest income. So it allows you to kind of work your way through all of our ratios anywhere on the platform just by clicking on the data dictionary and then searching for the field that you're interested in. And you can certainly also do a data dump where you export all of our fields into an Excel environment if that's something you want to have as a document for any particular reason. And the same thing with the call report field list. You can get a comprehensive list of all of our fields ordered or organized or categorized by the category of financial data they're in, all in an Excel environment as well. So we thought that would be a helpful reference.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And again, a huge shout out to Steve and our IT team. This was, pretty massive undertaking. But I think one of the things that, the users have certainly indicated to us, one of the values or things you like about QwickAnalytics is the transparency of being able to understand where everything is coming from. And so we felt like the data dictionary was the next step in trying to do this. So certainly we'll be, looking for ways over time to even, improve what we're showing here. But, step one was really to get all of this into your hands. So you could, on your own, if you had questions about how something was derived, you would be able to figure that out.
Yep.
Couple of questions have come in, Steve.
Sure.
First off, was, if we have you calculate our warms, can we still manually input our data?
Oh, absolutely. So, and it's a good point. Something that is what you'll find is a common refrain from me as a talking point. And whenever we consider any sort of enhancement to the CECLSolver tool, we are eminently aware of how many users we have that like the tool exactly like it is and don't want to do anything differently than they have been doing. So the tool will still work exactly as it does now. Let's say in the loan portfolio summary right here, this will all function exactly as it does. You'll be able to plug in your warms, save new scenarios. Nothing will be different. There'll just be a couple drop down boxes right up here where if you had been giving us your data and we've been calculating your warms, you'd be able to click on that drop down box and choose a date that you gave us the warms. And if you choose that date and then choose that methodology, it will just populate these values here. They'll still be overridable. They'll still look like this, but it'll just be one less step that you guys have to do. If you don't feel like, if you're worried about, user entry error in typing those things in on an ongoing basis.
Great. And then another question came in. We were recently told we needed to hold our unused commitments in a liability GL. We've not been holding them in a GL at all. And then we're under the impression, based on our size, we did not need to. Has there been chatter or clarification from the bank's auditor? So again, yeah, go ahead, Steve. You can take this.
Yeah, I would say, yes, you do need to keep it as a separate bucket on the liability side of the balance sheet. But you are also in very good company. As I've shared a couple times on previous coffee talks, and I'll share the statistic again. Despite the fact that almost all commercial banks in the country have at least some level of unfunded commitments, significantly more than half of the community banks in the country still currently, as of March 31st, have $0 in reserve for that unfunded commitment, despite the fact that it's discussed more explicitly in the CECL regulations as being there. So lots and lots. The majority of community banks were never really filling that value out, despite it being on the call reports before. But there is more focus on it now under CECL, and so I think we won't be able to sort of get away with not having that as separately in that liability account much longer. John?
Yeah, and so again, on our summary page, and we've discussed this on previous coffee talks, there are, with the new guidance, three unique reserves, right? There's the overall reserve for the loan portfolio, a reserve for the held to maturity securities, and then the third reserve, which we're discussing here, is in the other liabilities section regarding unfunded commitments. We do have some screenshots from a previous coffee talk, so you can reach out to your salesperson and they can get you those sent out to you. And I think they might also reside on the YouTube channel, but we certainly do have slides. Oh, there Steve's pulling it up right there. So
yeah, we have a reference guide that discusses the three different spots for reserve under CECL. There's the standard loan portfolio, which is the contra asset like it always has been. There's the ACL for HTM securities, which is irrelevant for 97% of you. But that's netted out of a securities on the balance sheet. And then there's a separate ACL for unfunded commitments on the liability side. And that's where it is on the call report, Schedule RCG, other liabilities, allowance for credit losses on off balance sheet commitments. And then we show, there's the loan portfolio one, there's the securities one, and that's the value that would have to be for the unfunded commitments.
So Steve, we had a follow-up question.
Sure.
They didn't hear what you said on the percentage of the banks that currently don't have a reserve for the unfunded commitments.
Let's not foreshadow too much. I have a slide that shows the exact number and discusses how it's changed over the last couple of quarters. We'll hit it in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, just give them the number though, and we'll show them. We'll talk about it again.
I think it's 40. I think right now it's 45%. I think it was 50 or 55%. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the exact number, but around half.
Yeah, and I think what we're going to see, that's come down a little bit. I do think, again, I think we're all in agreement. Most of us recognize that there really probably is very little material risk in those unfunded commitments. For some, there may be. But again, I think this is a large investor, large bank issue, but nevertheless, we're forced to comply. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, as Steve said, on the slide he's prepared. The next question is regarding qualitative adjustments. Should we focus on global adjustments over the entire portfolio or place emphasis on individual pools as economic conditions change? So I'll take this first, Steve, and then I'll let you answer as well. So again, Q factors are really art and science, right? I think it's a little bit of the philosophy that you want to maintain and how you want to think about changes. I think the answer to is simply, the answer is both, but I do think that more focus on, what truly impacts your individual portfolio is most critical, right? Because again, we are at record unemployment, but a third of the banks today we're talking about having charged off a loan in the first quarter, right? So no one size is going to fit all. But I think what we want to do and continue to do is really always be cognizant of what's happening on the macro level. But ultimately, we want to be able to articulate what's going on in our backyard, right? And so the things that drive and impact our community, to me, is most important. And I think that's, to me, what Q Factors does. And then increasingly, and I think this is where we're, next week we have a call on IntelliCredit and the portfolio analyzer. I think increasingly we want to look to our own portfolio and try to identify changes in it, right? Is our, obviously our past dues rising, but, before they start to occur, right? Are we seeing changes in our risk grades? Are we seeing changes in our debt service coverage of our borrowers? Are we seeing changes in credit scores? Are we seeing changes in LTVs? Again, all of those things are precursors potentially, of more risk in your portfolio. And ultimately, that's really what we're trying to capture, with reserve philosophy. So Steve, go ahead and offer.
Yeah, no, I don't know how much I have to add to that. It's certainly both. But what certain qualitative factors are going to be starting at the global level and then be refined for specific pools on a relative basis. So what I mean by that is thinking about an economic adjustment, right? If you're gonna, I would start by making some sort of a relatively global economic adjustment Q factor wise, and then kind of the next phase of sharpening the point a little bit is to consider, are there any particular parts of the portfolio given my local economy that are going to be more sensitive to this general direction we see the economy going in? So you might have a 20 basis point economic adjustment across the board, and then you have a modifier for that where it's +5 more for these two segments and -5 for these other couple segments. But you start at a sort of a global assumption from an economic standpoint, and then you can kind of tweak a couple particular portfolios as you go. The other qualitative adjustments that have to do with your knowledge of your internal workings of your credit portfolio are going to be, I think, more build-up method. I think they start more at the ground level, at the segment level, as opposed to a global adjustment across the board for changes in underwriting. I think those would be probably, you'd be thinking about those at the segment level when you start the adjustment. Does that make sense?
Yes. And Steve, maybe just click on the Q factors tab, because maybe I've actually had this conversation a number of times here in the last month. And I think, again, each of these portfolios is a little bit unique, right? I think, again, you have to be cognizant of what's happening at the macro level, or the state level, national level, regarding GDP and interest rates and unemployment. But for instance, we've certainly seen the consumer area of portfolios see an uptick in charge-off activity and past dues. However, mortgages have remained really strong, right? Obviously, office space has been impacted by work at home and high vacancy rates. So all of those individual portfolios are reacting differently to what's currently happening, and I think that's where I think you want to have emphasis, within your own pool or your own portfolio, of understanding what those changes are. And the more information you have at your disposal to see those types of changes we think is helpful. And again, that's one of what we think are the real strong points of the analyzer, right? Is it it blends the top-down approach with the bottom-up approach, right? It gives you that loan level data about your portfolio that can, again, help you better inform your Q factors and really just better inform anything that might be going on with your portfolio. A couple of other questions have come in. Let's see, up to now, we've been adding the same qualitative factor percentage to all of our loan types. We do not have credit cards, for example. How would you suggest segregating that or justifying different Q factors? Again, I think some percentage across the portfolio makes sense, but if you want to move forward, I would start to, again, just look for portfolios that maybe, need more special attention. And as they occur, where you feel like there's something occurring in one of those portfolios that is different from your overall blended rate, then start to explain why you're making that change. And I think that's perfectly acceptable. I think it's good practice, but it doesn't have to happen overnight, right? It doesn't have to be a blunt change to do it. Just start to slowly do it, but most importantly, explain in some type of narrative why you're doing it and the information you're using to support that, because ultimately that is what a regulator and auditor is going to want to see, is what prompted this change. And so
it's the points
do
for
it
paper.
slowly, do it moderately, but do it with support.
And just keep in mind that typically adding more detail, adding more granularity tends to be a one-way street. Once you've gone to that next level of granularity, as far as like splitting a bucket into 2 or 3 buckets to get more exact, you can't. It's very difficult to go back in the other direction. So I think you'd want to think very carefully about how much detail you go into as far as subdividing pools beyond call report levels or anything else, just because that additional precision is not necessarily going to lead to any more accuracy in the overall calculation, but it's going to be a lot more work for you on an ongoing basis. And you're going to lose the ability to compare it apples to apples to this external data that we can provide, like the peer data. Because once you're outside of the realm or more granular than the realm of the call report buckets, then you don't have that peer data to really compare those loss trends to going historically.
Yeah, and I would rely on the peer data, like Steve said, right? It's really can be helpful in supporting or defending a move. Again, if your experience is much better than the peers, right? I mean, that's support for clearly making changes. Next question was, can you give your thoughts on reversion and what you think auditors are looking for? I don't have a whole lot. I mean, I think we can answer specific things, but that's a little bit of a can of worms. I don't know that I have a whole lot to add or offer there, Steve, unless there's a specific question the auditor had.
No, I mean it's subjective, just like picking a look back period, right? And justifying a look back period is wholly subjective. The reversion concept is as well. Typically, in our tool, the default assumption is with shorter warms that the projection period is going to be the warm or the look back period. If you want to set a separate reversion period such that which is only a portion of the projection of the full projection period, then we can discuss with you how best to implement that using our tool. And it's just a simple piece. Since we do our qualitative factor adjustments, since in our tool they're lifetime Q factor adjustments, you can apply a simple multiplier to that if you want to use a reversion, if you want to use a projection period which is shorter than the look forward, so to speak.
Yep. Steve, the next question is, when do you expect the 2001 to 7 data to be available in the historical analysis? And also, when will Q1 data be added to the historical analysis?
So the easiest part of the question, the Q1 will be available not this weekend, but next weekend. So everyone's going to be finishing. Well, you guys are all probably right now trying to finish up your call reports. They're due during the week next week, and so next weekend we'll be flipping the switch, which means that the entire first quarter data set for peer and historical will be available next weekend on the CECLSolver tool. As far as the 2001 to 2007, you can access it. You can't access it directly in the interactive tool for the CECLSolver, but you can access it in. Well, I'll show you. I'll hold my control down so I go to another. If I click on the My Bank button, right? If I leave the CECLSolver and just go into QwickAnalytics in general here, and I click on the asset quality. Oh, this is a summary, not the detail, but that's fine. I can come here and I can choose annual. And if I go here, now I will see here are 30 to 89 non-accrual, Oreo, restructured NPAs, net charge-offs, going back to here's 2003. And if I go all the way back to 2001. So on the interactive pages, it's already there. There are certain line items that we're still cleaning up as we go further back, ones that have had multiple changes in mapping, so to speak, over time. But the vast majority of them are already available in the interactive going all the way back to 2001. If you see an errant NA or 0 in some of the oldest years, just know that with this database size that we have, it is a Herculean effort to make sure we touch every item that's used on our platform going back that far. But if you see some that you think we need to clean up, certainly shoot us a message and say, hey, I think you guys missed this one from 23 years ago, and we'll jump back on it.
Okay, all right, let's see. I'm gonna take back the screen, I think, Steve, here for a second.
Sure. I will stop sharing.
Okay, all right, so I think that kind of gets us up to speed or caught up. And again, I think we'll make all of our efforts to, Steve mentioned next weekend, but I think we're ideally we'll have that data available even next Friday for you, but certainly by the weekend, because the 30th will be the 2nd. So, anything you want to add on we've touched on this last month, Steve?
We mentioned this a couple times now. It's just we had a lot of interest in this, and so I want to make sure for those of you who missed any of our last couple of coffee talks, we have the more robust user management and access control now, which allows you to manage all the users that you have for the CECL tool and for QwickAnalytics. If you go to the next slide, Sean, it just gives you, this is just what the portal looks like. If you're an administrator for your institution, you can see all the users that have access to QwickAnalytics, and if they have access to the CECLSolver, if they have full access to the CECLSolver where they can make changes and save scenarios, or if they just have read-only access, whether it's maybe someone who's doing some internal auditing, or a member of the board who wants to look at the CECL tool, but you don't want them making changes, or if you want to give temporary access to an examiner or an auditor, you can give them read-only access using this tool as well. So, yeah.
Steve, another question came in. When we are using your prepayment speeds, most of our mortgage loans are ARMs. Are your prepayment speeds more tailored to fixed rate loans? Are you looking at our portfolio when adjusting our WARMs? So again, yeah, we're using data provided from the, that's kind of looking at.
We have that on the next slide, actually.
Yeah, fixed rate loans. So we're not necessarily looking at your portfolio.
So we scoured the internet many times, and all the regulatory bodies when we were first developing the tool, looking for some sort of helpful guidance on WARMs and prepayment rates. And the only good data that we had that was relatively current at the time, this was a couple of years ago now, was the FHFA put out a prepayment monitoring report, does every quarter. That is a great long report that does a lot of detailed work on prepayments, but only for mortgages, right? And not for all the other, commercial loans and everything else. So that is a good reference for prepayment rates, but just for mortgage loans. So then the FDIC has not put out anything else. The most helpful regulator in this regard, surprisingly, was the NCUA. The NCUA did a study, contracted out a large third-party statistical firm to get data from smaller credit unions across the country and look at loan level data and come up with prepayment rates, annual prepayment rates that are perfectly appropriate for a CCL or an AC, or CECL or ACL type calculation. Of course, they were for credit unions, so we were using they used the credit union's loan segmentation, but we did a little bit of mapping to take the credit union loan segmentation, which is actually not that much different anymore than the commercial bank loan segmentation, as you can see here. And that's kind of the default values that we have now. That's the best industry data that's out there. It's loan segment specific for community financial institutions, and that's about as good as it's going to get until the FDIC comes out and does a similar study for commercial banks. But I wouldn't hold my breath at this point.
Yeah.
So we feel like that's the I can, if you're curious more about the universe of institutions and how that specific third-party study was done, I can find you a link on the NCUA's website that discusses, not in too much detail, but a little detail about how they did that study. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, they're updated quarterly, but again, I think all of this needs to be prefaced with the idea of the impact of prepayment rates on the WARM, right? I mean, this is a rabbit hole, as we've said many times before. I know I've said many times before, right? It's still it's an estimate. The standard, calls for something reasonable and supportable. This, in my opinion, certainly fills that or meets that bar. The question becomes, how much work do you want to do to try to be, again, more precise, probably not more accurate? How much time do you want to expend trying to determine a prepayment rate, when in reality, if you go into the calculator today and play around with changing the prepayment rate, it doesn't make a material difference in your WARM. And so we made the determination that as a starting point in our tool in calculating the WARMs, we would use these as a default thing. You are free to use whatever you would like, create your own, go down that rabbit hole if you'd like. We were not going to send you down that rabbit hole to waste your time, in our opinion, if, for no good reason, right? Part of this whole CECLSolver is trying to make your life, more, happier performing this analysis. Sending you off on an exercise that, in our opinion, just isn't the analogy, right? The juice is not worth the squeeze, right? It's like, to do more work around prepayment rates, to me, it just isn't worth it. And so
it's a lot more squeeze. Doing a WARM calculation, as you guys, as many of you know, we do help many of you with your WARM calculations, and that's one level of complexity. Getting that loan level data and doing the appropriate WARM calculations. Doing a full-fledged prepayment study would require about 20 times that much data and about 10 times that much time, and have a ton of assumptions built into it as it is. So that is a huge, huge step that I do not believe, and we have not heard any examiners, regulators, or auditing firms have any expectation that a typical community bank is going to do that type of a full level prepayment study. Sometimes you get lucky and your core processor has a prepayment report that you can request from them that's either free or not overly expensive for you to request. But otherwise, starting with this industry guidance that's adapted from the NCUA is we think the best starting point by far.
The next question is it possible to add a section for GL compared to calculations so we don't have to use the quote unquote recent historical data spot on the summary page? We are more interested in our GL compared to calc versus history comparison. So actually, Steve and I had this conversation yesterday. So we are looking at reviewing the summary page to try to see what we can do to make some modifications to address this type of question. So I think, Steve, I don't know if you want to show why we did what we did, but we understand the question here, and again, we are reviewing it.
Yeah.
So if you have suggestions you'd like it to look, please send them to us. But it literally was a conversation we had with our IT team yesterday.
Yeah, it was.
And Steve and I are going back and forth on it, and so again, we understand the differences of thought here, and we're gonna try to put this.
It comes down to how people want to summarize, right, what they're looking at. If our most common user case is an institution that runs this on a quarterly basis, and they're comparing their current scenario, which let's say it's as of March 31st, with a quarter before that. So the previous period would be the call report from 12/31, and the current period or the current scenario would be a March 31st scenario, either preliminary before the call report's filed, or maybe finalized closely after the call report is filed. But we also have lots of institutions that run the tool on a monthly basis, and they want to compare an internal number from a scenario from a month ago to an internal number, GL number, to from the current scenario as of now. So trying to build the flexibility in to be able to compare, historical call report quarter to current scenario, or to next call report quarter, or month to month, neither of which are quarter end, it adds flexibility to the tool. But when you do that, as you know, it adds complexity too. And so we're trying to make it as intuitive as possible for as many people as possible. But we always want to hear that kind of feedback, and as specific as you could possibly be as to, hey, this is what we're trying to have it help us, show to the board. And so all those suggestions are helpful.
And the question came in about this data. This data is in the warm estimator tool in the links,
Yes.
so you can get the NCUA data and all that already just by going into the CECLSolver. The next question is, we are using 15-year look back, but as this moves forward, loss rates continue to decline. Should we adjust to a specific economic cycle, say 2008 to 11? Go ahead, Steve. I'll jump in after you.
No, hold on. I was reading something else. I didn't catch the question.
Okay, well, I'll answer this one first then.
Okay.
I mean, you can certainly do that. I think that's the optionality we want you to have. I think part of giving you the visibility to see all of your historicals is to do exactly that, right? We have banks who we know from the OCC as a best practice are having them expand economic cycles to make sure they include 2008 and 2011. I think everybody's a little bit different on how you approach this, but the look back tool is really designed to give you whatever flexibility or optionality or visibility into your own numbers that makes it the most relevant for what's going to happen, or what your expectation or consideration is going forward. That's really what I think you just want to be able to do and be able to document. That's why you did it. So I guess my point is, I don't want to get into either or, right? I'm just saying do them both, right? Look at them both and just see which one seems more appropriate. Steve?
Yeah, I think it's all about the trade-off between there's two pieces of calculating your of a CECL calculation or an ACL calculation, right? There's the historical, and then there's the qualitative factor adjustments. So there's a trade-off between how much of our expected loss do we want to capture in our historical data versus how much do we want to capture in qualitative factors. So if you have a very long look back period and you're encapsulating the entire last credit cycle, just know that, or be able to articulate why your Q factor adjustments might be a little less than the next guy's, right? Because they might look at that and say, well, geez, you have a long look back period, but your Q factors are really low. Don't you think there's going to be some economic stress on the horizon? And your response would be, yes, I do think there's going to be some economic stress on the horizon. However, that is already captured in my look back in my historical analysis, because I'm including 2009, 10, 11 in it. So I would be double counting expected losses to have a look back period that includes economic stress, and then add economic stress in the Q factors, unless I think it's going to be more economic stress in the future than there was during the 2009, 10, 11 period. So just make sure you're not double booking, so to speak, at your own peril, because for that. And if you have a shorter look back period where you just don't have much losses at all in your look back, you're going to have more burden on your qualitative factor adjustments, because you're going to have to take all the expectation of any potential future downturn is going to all have to be captured in the Q factor since you're not capturing the economic stress in the history. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and Steve, I think maybe just pull up your screen because again, I think probably under recognized is a change we made with the look back period where we did give them the ability to customize it, but ultimately they can override and put in the loss rate they want to use, right?
Yes.
And so I think we should probably just point that out, right? Because again, I think at the end of the day, we want to give you your information. We're giving you all the pure data, but if there is a particular historical loss rate to the kind of the explanation Steve was giving, that you still want to use Q factors for economic loss, but you want to put maybe a higher bar or a more punitive historical loss rate into your calculation, you do have the ability to do that. And so I think it's probably noteworthy just to share that again.
Yeah. So what I just did here was, again, this is a
I don't see your
default
screen here.
scenario. So the warm,
Your screen's not up yet.
you can't start while you, oh, you're still, it said you were.
I just stopped it.
All right. All right.
Trying to reshare.
All right. So I missed the critical point there. Let me get back to, hold on. Let me undo this and then redo it. So if I open up a default scenario, and let's just say my warms were all 2 years, which obviously doesn't make any sense, but let's just say they were. You'd have 2 years worth of data, well, 2.25, close enough. But let's say we wanted to capture losses. We have almost no losses here over the last couple of years. So we don't want to change our warms, but we want to capture some of the pain that happened, stress that happened during these years here. So I'm going to come up here and in one foul swoop, I'm going to say, I want to use a 14, 15 year warm, right? Across the board. I mean, sorry, look back period across the board. So I just made my look back period go all the way back to the fourth quarter of 2010 across the board. So what that does is now you can see all these older years of stress back in 2010 and 11 are now being captured, and the loss rates are reflecting some of the higher losses there. So that's one way to do that, just keeping in mind that you're going to have lower Q factors if you've bumped this up. What Sean was pointing out was if you wanted to just go ahead and override the historical loss rate to plug in something internal that you want to see from whatever calculation that you do, or just want to be more punitive, you can come here and just say, I want to use 25 basis point lifetime loss rate for the mortgage loans, no matter what my losses were, how much they aggregated over time. So if I plug in that 25 basis points there, I go back to the summary here, you'll see that there it is. I've so to speak, just completely overridden the historical aggregate loss rate with a different number. And that can be for the reasons we just talked about, or that can be because you just had a recent loss, a non-recurring loss due to some very specific, a fraud situation or whatnot. And instead of either you've been told to, or you prefer to remove that from the historical loss analysis, as opposed to dealing with it as a qualitative factor adjustment. You could come here and actually recalculate the historical loss rate to exclude that loss. Again, subjective, whether you choose to exclude it from the historical record, or whether you'd rather go in here and make a custom Q factor adjustment to reverse a non-recurring one-time loss like that. Sean?
Yeah, I mean, we actually had this scenario this week, and
Yeah.
Steve and I proposed these different ways, right? Because my thought was, okay, you could use your previous quarter's loss rate, and if the estimate or the understanding is that it was a one-time kind of event for fraud or something like that, and you didn't want it to overall impact the rate, you could override it to the old historical and then explain the fact, what happened with the one-time event. So again, just optionality, right? There's never one size fits all. We want you to have options on how you can address, different scenarios or, different things you're trying to do. So, and I think it also brings up a good, point too, is, underutilized, probably in my opinion, is our stress test, right? We're going to talk about this in an upcoming webinar about QwickAnalytics. But in that tool, we have all these historicals, and you can, again, like with peer numbers, really be punitive and see what losses looked like for the worst of institutions back during the crisis, right? Again, you can see your historicals in the same way. And so, again, I think there's more information available to you in the tool that can be helpful if you're really trying to, be a bit more punitive. The stress test is a great way to kind of go in and, to do that, right? That was the idea of the stress test. And this is a way where they're potentially complementary, is to look at that stress test and see, again, some of those more punitive loss rates.
I think it logged me out.
No.
Ah.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, we did have a couple more questions come in,
Sure.
Steve. Next up, is there a way to have Q factors be automatically mapped from the most, hi Mustafa, from the most recently completed scenario over to the new scenario being worked on? So essentially,
that's where the idea of updating old scenarios comes in. So if you have a scenario from last month or last quarter and you want to create a new, and you want to update it, you can. That's what we suggest doing. Instead of creating a completely new scenario from scratch and then copying over all your work, or try to choose particular pieces of it to have, move over on an automated basis. What we suggest you do, and the steps that we have in a couple webinars that we've done where we discuss it, and we can send a video clip about how to do that as well, is pull up the old scenario, start pushing the look back periods into the more recent data to include it, and then just modify, right? You modify the qualitative factor adjustments, you check your notes, you tweak any justification or anything else, and then you save it as the new scenario. So there's a couple things you'd want to do to make sure that you're properly moving that old or updating that old scenario to include all the new data. But it's certainly the way we design the tool to work. When new financial data comes out and becomes available, it is available in your old scenarios if you wanted to take those old scenarios and move them forward financially and then resave them as a new one, right? You don't want to save over it because each scenario that you save is frozen in time as of a point in time and retains its historical accuracy, right? But you can still take an old, you can pull an old one from 3 quarters ago and then just roll all the financials forward and update qualitative factors and then save it as a new scenario right now. So if that's something you want to discuss a little bit, we can kind of walk you through a couple ways to do that.
When all the system updates flow if you rename an old scenario, not just data.
When all the system updates flow, if you rename an old scenario, not just yeah, if you have a scenario from 3 quarters ago and you come and pull it up now, all the administration of a tool, all the pages, the way the methodology works is updated, is still current. So yes, you can take one from a year ago and roll it, even though we didn't have a file upload tab a year ago. If you open up your scenario from a year ago, you'll still see the file upload tab, there. The new functionality is still there.
The next question is, could it be possible under the Q factors to add specific dollar amounts versus percentages? Looking to add a column for projected budgeted losses in Q factors.
Not directly within the tool. The tool is designed specifically, let me see, for percentage qualitative factor adjustments. However, yeah, it can't be done directly within the tool. I mean, we do have, depending upon how you do your Q factors, whether you use this or whether some people take advantage of our matrix. We call our Q factor determination support. This is an Excel file that just provides a framework that you could use to do qualitative factor adjustments, and then you could take the output from that and sort of plug it in here, but it would still be on a percentage basis. So as of right now, there's no way to do that. The tricky thing with the dollar amount would be as soon as balances change, then all those old dollar amounts, you'd really want them pegged to a certain ratio or percentage to begin with. So you can't really have it both ways within the tool and have them both work efficiently. So if you need some help with that or want some ideas, we're happy to hop on a call and discuss it with you.
All right, so we're up on the
I did all this other work, all this other slides we didn't get to.
Well,
see all this data.
We'll still cover a few of them.
All right.
So again, this is something that we've shown and talked about, and we'll continue to update. And actually, we're working towards getting into the tool. But here's
we're going to be adding this to the interactive tool. So as a separate page in the actual CECLSolver, you'll be able to use this page in maybe next week, either next week or the week after, actually. And this is just another. This shows what of all of our users and all of the scenarios all of our users have run. We were able to pool that data and since we have so many users now, it really becomes an excellent tool to see proprietary segment level changes in warms over time and Q factors and reserves over time. Since most community banks don't have to fill out that disaggregated reserve stuff on the call report, there is no publicly available information for typical community banks and what their ACLs look like at the segment level. And so we're the first really to provide that at an industry with a good chunk of the industry in there. And this could also be another great default values for warms, right? If you're in between periods and you don't feel like doing a whole warm calculation, or we're not doing it for you, and you can either, you have multiple options, right? If you're not calculating your own warms or don't feel like doing it right now, but you want to plug something in, you can use that NCUA co-opted data for default warm values, or you could use these. These are median values for all of our users that have run scenarios over the last 5 quarters. So we're talking hundreds and hundreds of banks and thousands of scenarios. So it really is some great data.
Next question was how many users do we have? I think between I don't know the exact breakdown between banks and credits, but I think it's 670 users. I think is.
So when I was updating this the other day, just for the first in that column for the first quarter, right? For the warms for the first quarter, we had 271 unique community banks run scenarios in the first quarter from 42 of the 50 states in the US.
But we're not even done with the first quarter filing.
No, and we're not even done with the first quarter. So it'll be even more unique. And that's just commercial banks. If I include credit unions, we're talking 600 or 700 unique institutions in the industry each quarter. And that's just scenarios. If we look at each segment, we're talking about thousands and thousands of segment level user scenarios.
So again, like Steve said, we've been busy, again, not just with the day-to-day, but again, looking to try to find ways to improve the information that we give, we can share with you. And so, we've gotten a lot of good feedback from these pages, from the coffee talks. And so, as Steve indicated, we're working to get this available to you as an interactive page.
And we see it serving 3 purposes. It could be your default warm values before you start digging into it yourselves. You could just be looking for trends and say, hey, everyone else's warms are dropping. Why aren't mine? Or it can be used as justification for your relative levels of Q factors. Certainly, we have industry-wide peer data on from the call reports on reserve levels for your peers, but this segment level stuff is great, and it's going to be great justification for your Q factors and your reserve levels and your warms meeting industry standards.
Yeah, again, I think it's an example more information can be helpful, right? You don't have to use it or rely on it, but it does give you some context and some potential support, and just takes you a little bit out of am I different from the pack, if you will. And so
Yep.
we felt like it was it's as we've shared it, we've gotten good feedback from all of you that hey, we like this information. So as Steve indicated, we're working our IT team's working diligently to get this along with Steve to get it out in an interactive page. And so the following pages, again, we just kind of go down into a little even more granularity, not only about a median, but we do have requests again from you. What are maybe some different percentiles? So Steve's kind of done that here.
Yeah, this one is kind of summary. I know we've talked about this. I want to go to the next one because it references, yes, this right here was the previous one.
Previous one. Okay.
That's where our question, or the first question that we had there. So for unfunded commitments, as of December 31st, just under 45%, which is down from 50% a quarter ago and 55% at mid-year, of all the community banks in the country reported $0 in reserve for the unfunded commitments, with a median unfunded commitment ACL of only 6 basis points, which was only 1 basis point just a quarter ago. And virtually all of those 4,300 community banks in the United States have some level of unfunded commitments. So half of the banks in the country with unfunded commitments are still putting 0 there for the ACL on the liability side of the balance sheet. So I hope that helps the question.
Yeah, and I think again, what I take from this is, I think we can all defend why we think we have 0, but I think the fact that it was 54% at mid-year and now we're down to 45, it's probably going lower, right? Because I can tell you, we hear from you, our auditors or our regulators are asking us why it's 0, right? And again, you can defend it, but you also have to recognize if it's 0, it's almost assuredly going to generate a question about defending why you have 0, which is okay. Don't get me wrong. But just understand, it feels like they want something in there. And, again, I think over time we'll probably, get better prescription or guidance on what they want. But again, I think, I suspect that number is going to continue to go down from 0 or from 45%.
Yeah. I mean, it's gone from 54 to 45 in the last 2 quarters, despite no meaningful change in levels of unfunded commitments for community banks.
Right. Exactly. Again, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can breeze through the last few here. I just wanted to, this is something I wanted to provide as a take home for everybody. This doesn't come from the CECLSolver tool specifically. This actually is data that comes from our Excel add-in. For those of you familiar with our Excel add-in, we have a widget, so to speak, you might call it, an add-in in Excel that allows you to query anything, pull up any data point in our entire platform, any piece of financial data on any bank or group of banks or credit unions or holding companies or publicly traded institutions in the United States. So it didn't take me very long at all to pull up and say, hey, I was wondering what the trends are in 30 to 89 days, right? The first place where credit quality hits the call report from a leading indicator standpoint is in 30 to 89 days past due. And we can see those are increasing. So I chose some kind of subtotal levels of a loan portfolio. And you can see for almost every single segment of the portfolio, the first quarter of this year, although only a third of the banks in the country have filed their call reports, maybe 40%, of those 40% that have filed, almost every segment is at the highest level of 30 to 89 days that we've seen in a while. They're not dangerously, high, but they're higher right now than they have been for a little while, as you can see here. And if you flip to the next, and that's median, and so did you go past 2?
Whoops.
Yeah, there's 39. There's non-accrual. So I was curious. All right, well, how far along is it starting to flow, right? And so we see here also median and 75th percentile. While the median values are still kind of 0, you start to see those 75th percentile non-accrual percentages at the segment level starting to creep up from negligible to 10, 15, 20, 25 basis points. It hasn't really hit the charge-offs yet, as you guys, for the most part, know. If you go to the last one of these three, I just looked at gross charge-offs, right? And you can see I didn't even do the median, because median charge-offs are pretty zeroed across the board on an average, for typical community bank. 75th percentiles are still mostly zeros, but for consumer loans, they're not. And for C&I, they're starting to creep up a little bit at the 75th percentile. And the 90th percentile, we're really starting to see some significant creep in asset quality issues. So these are the leading indicators that we look for direction.
Yeah, exactly. Just direction. Exactly. I think that's the important thing. Again, this is the chart you have access to today in QwickAnalytics that you can check for the industry ACL data from UBPR Peer Group 3. Again, it's information that can, again, give you a sense of where the larger banks think, their reserves are going, and you can kind of see those in bulk. So
that's
again,
that's the disaggregated stuff, right? The reserve force subsegmented into 6 different segments of the portfolio, but only filled out by the larger institutions. So it gives you some general idea of direction at the super segment level, so to speak.
And so again, as we were back to an earlier question about Q factors, right? All this information, again, in and of itself, none of it's a magic bullet, but it does give you a sense of where the industry, the participants in the industry feel like their risk is going. So again, it can be helpful and supplemental, but it also can be defensive, for you supporting why your reserve is what it is. Okay, so again, great conversation, great questions today. Thank you all very much. Good luck if you haven't filed your call report, getting that in this weekend and early next week. As Steve indicated, we'll work to get that data for sure by next week, and even hopefully by Friday. We'll be back again next month for a coffee talk. Check out our YouTube page if you haven't. Next Friday, we do have another installment of our loan data coffee talks, where we're offering 6-month free trials. Get a look at your own data and see where that is. Oops. And we've got a couple of webinars upcoming. May 21st, we've got our quarterly trends webinar with David Ruffin and myself, and then Steve and I'll be back at the end of May for our coffee talk. So let me just see if there's one last thank you very much on the comment. Steve, any final words before we let everybody off to their weekend?
I think I've probably said too much already.
All right. Well, thank you all again for joining us and making these coffee talks so special, and we appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next month. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye now.